Welcome to the next 75 minutes or so, where we're going to talk about human potential and aligning internal well-being to enable external impact. My name is Terence Gilbey. I am the General Manager and the CEO of the Esalen Institute. And with me today,
I'm Cheryl Fraenzl, and I'm the Director of Programs at the Esalen Institute. So this is actually more of a workshop where it's not purely lecture, so hopefully you're willing to play with us. We're going to talk a little bit about Esalen. Why are Terry and I standing in front of you talking about this? And we're going to talk about well-being and human potential, what's entailed in that. Additionally, I want to introduce the Wellbeing Project to you on a very high level and talk a little bit about the results of that project. And lastly, and probably most importantly, what we actually want to have you do is experience what's a well-being practice. What does that feel like? And we're going to be doing, most of our time is going to be spent doing that. With that,
Good.
Now Terry.
All right, thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
So just to introduce Esalen to you a little bit, we are always known as the birthplace of the human potential movement, which some of you may have known historically. And we have literally been working over the last decades around bringing the best for people to actually experience all of their potential. We're a recognized leader in human potential, and this really comes out of early work that was done by Aldous Huxley. You may know him, he's famous about his human potentialities. And Frederick Spiegelberg, who was a religion of no religions professor, or a religious studies professor, and was famous for his piece around the religion of no religions, or the religion of all religions. And that speaks to Esalen's inclusive nature of what we strive for. And it's really focused around the 7 items that you see there below, from arts and creativity to relationship and self. And I'll talk just a moment about Esalen's vision. The theory of change at Esalen is all about impacting the individual, and it's kind of like the ripples in the pond. We bring about social change by enabling individuals to step into their full personal potential and then pass that on as they go forward out into the world. So Cheryl, a little bit about the Wellbeing Project and the relationship.
Yes, so you heard a little bit about what Esalen is. I should start this by also talking about what is well-being, because there's a lot of definitions about that. Some people, is it happy? And that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we talk about well-being. What we're talking about is that inner alignment with what you're doing, that sense of presence, that sense of connection, of being aware of how you do what you do. So your inner purpose matching your outer purpose. And that's what we're talking about here. And hence was born the Wellbeing Project. Very early on, a group of very well-known organizations such as Skoll, Synergos, Ashoka, and others joined together because there was an identified need to take a look at well-being within the social impact field. Why? Well, because there was consistently high burnout being reported. And Ashoka actually ended up doing a survey, and over 80% of their fellows reported being in high burnout. Well, who cares? You know, as long as the job gets done. But there's great reason to care about that. There's great reason to care about how we do what we do, how we impact others. And also, solving problems with the same consciousness that created it likely doesn't solve the problem, or at least doesn't elevate the solutions. And also, more practically, people leaving the field, people who are talented, have a lot to give, are doing good things, and just have nothing left. Nothing left. It's like, that's not good. So the Wellbeing Project, in a nutshell, has a couple of different arms. I'm going to talk just specifically and very briefly about one of them. The question was, what if we actually gave permission, space, tools, resources to people to actually engage in their own personal well-being, their own alignment with their purpose, their own consciousness around how I do what I do. What happens? So at this point in time, there are 4 cohorts that have gone through this. It's about 20, 25 people per cohort. They actually go through an 18-month process that they commit to doing what it takes to align inner well-being. And at the minimum, there are 3 in-person retreats where there are 7 days of skills and practices being developed. There is wisdom teachers. There is a dean of students who works individually with each person on an individual plan. What will it take? What's out of alignment? What are some tools and skills? So it might be an intense meditation practice to slow down the mind, to become more grounded. It may be working with trauma. There's a lot of trauma recovery in the field. So this is a little bit who participated in that. The goal was to get as broad of depth of people from all different sectors. Most of them were indeed leaders, though. And it is important to note that they self-identified as high burnout. They self-identified as, I'm about to leave this field. So this was exciting because there were over 48 different countries represented. So quickly, I want to talk just briefly. We're in the process of evaluating this. How did this, what happened when somebody actually committed to well-being? What happens? Did anything, really, is there really difference in their work? Well, yeah, actually, every single person did report. There is a difference in who I am and how I show up. I am different. First of all, there was an identified heroes model, and you're probably familiar with that. It's coming from I am the sole solution here. The weight of the world, it's me, I got to take care. That actually doesn't solve the problem. It's the same consciousness that likely created it. Most of us understand that logically it takes a majority of us, it takes a momentum, it takes many individuals coming together collectively with thoughts to create new solutions. There was also a new approach to success and failure because the end goal, there's always the end goal of solving that great big problem. There's a lack of celebration for the small steps, the present moment, what's happening right now, and actually celebrating those small successes and actually valuing where there was some disappointments. Instead of the lip service, incorporating that into this is what it takes to get to the big ideas, to the creative solutions, to actually solve that problem. And finally, maybe for me, most importantly, what there was an awareness is the pace, the go, 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 do your work at all costs and accomplish things. It's very external and it's very future-oriented. What our participants reported is becoming more centered, more present, more aware of right now. How am I doing what I do? And how do I do that with others? And instead of having the competition that often exists amongst colleagues and certainly amongst organizations, to come back into trust and collaboration and a deeper understanding that we are whole humans with both personal and professional lives, and that shows up wherever we are. Okay, so that's a little bit of the overview. Now what we want to do, actually before I go on, is there anybody, Bart, is there anybody else besides you in the room that is part of the Wellbeing Project? Ah, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of people here, myself and Terry. If you want to ask any more questions about that project, it's alive and kicking. It's not a forever after project, but its intention is to change the culture of social impact field. You certainly can ask. But right now what we're going to do is actually move into some of the things that were done during these 18-month experiments and give you some exposure to some well-being practices. I'm going to hand that over to my colleague.
Thank you.
to kick us off.
Okay, and to talk about coming into the present and into the moment, we're actually going to do a little bit of a meditation just to bring us here into this room and to set aside the conference for a moment. So I'm going to invite you all to participate in this. Some of you may already have a strong meditation practice. It's possible some of you have never meditated before or thought, I don't need that. But one of the great things about it is it's something that you can use today. You can use it for the rest of this conference and the forum, and you can use it when you leave here. And it is actually backed by a lot of solid science. This has been shown on many levels to just simply improve our ability to function, particularly in stressful situations. And I don't know about all of you, but I know that this work is stressful, at least for me, and I will use my I words in that space. I'm not going to run through these, but these are many of the well-documented benefits of meditation. So, with that, I'm going to invite you to participate in a little meditation. So if you'd like to just kind of get comfortable, normally both feet on the floor is a good place. I'm just going to take a seat here. And with that, I will invite you to close your eyes and just begin to feel your presence in the room. If you'd like to bring your attention to your breath and just notice your breath moving in and out of your body. And just notice that. Perhaps coming in through your nose, you can notice your breath moving down into your lungs. Perhaps you're breathing with your diaphragm. Perhaps you're not, and that's okay. So I just invite you to take your breath and notice what you're aware of in your body and direct your breath there. We're just breathing very slowly in through our nose and out through our mouths. And you might be noticing the seat that you're sitting on. You might be noticing your feet on the floor, or your hands might be in your lap or on your legs. But just take a moment and set all the thoughts of the conference aside and just focus on your breath. You might have a thought wander into your mind. That's okay. Just notice that it's there and set it to one side. And just return your attention back to your breath. Now take your attention where you might be feeling a little bit of tension in your body. Might be in your legs, might be in your shoulders. And just as you breathe in, move your breath to that area where you feel some tension. And just relax that tension. We're just going to continue to breathe. And then move your breath back up into your torso. And again, if your mind wanders, just set those thoughts aside. It's okay. We're continuing to breathe. Now we're going to notice what's going on in our body a little bit more. So you can take your breath and maybe feel your feet on the floor, and as you breathe in, take that breath and send it all the way down to your feet. And then as you breathe out, let it come back up. And then take a breath and send it all the way down to your toes. Notice your toes. Which toe do you put your breath into and why? Just continue to breathe and notice where your breath goes. Now bring your breath, and the next time you take your breath down, take it into your ankles and just hold it in your ankles. Now, next, bring your breath up to your knees. And notice your knees. Then we're going to bring our breath all the way up into our abdomen. We're going to notice our diaphragm. As it contracts, it pushes the air out of our lungs, and it's what helps us breathe. And all the time, if thoughts come into your mind, just relax, notice them, set them aside, and breathe. And in a moment, we're going to come back to the here and now and to this room. And I invite you to slowly open your eyes. Be gentle with yourself. Notice the light in the room. Notice the people in the room. And just take a moment and turn to somebody next to you and wish them good morning. All right. Thank you. Okay. And with that, welcome back to the present, and we'll bring a little energy back into the room. And Cheryl is actually going to walk us through an exercise now that is around what we call the Wheel of Life.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate the meditation, and like I hadn't before, we currently have a Skoll Fellow as a scholar in residence at Esalen. And he was also a member of the Wellbeing Project. And I swear I can see his meditation practice. He said he picked it up when he was in the Wellbeing Project in the 18 months, and he hasn't dropped it since. And he's the most grounded human. One of the offerings I'll suggest is that when you're out there listening to speakers, tune into your breath and listen to the speaker at the same time. See if you can keep the two in your awareness. It somehow deepens the listening in quite a profound way. So there's many aspects to life, of course, and at any given time, one or all of these aspects will be in alignment, but often and frequently they're not. So another thing that we did with the well-being participants, because the thought of life all in its entirety and how I find my inner strength and well-being in that is a pretty big concept. And so breaking it down into smaller pieces proves to be quite helpful usually. And so there's many ways of doing that and much more in depth. The one that is suitable for the very little amount of time that we have left is called the Wheel of Life. So in the middle of the table, each of you has a handout. If you have not already passed them out, would somebody grab that handout? Make sure everybody at the table has one. And what we wanted to invite you into today is just we're going to take a minute. We're going to give you a little bit of time at looking at each of the aspects on the wheel. Now, you may have different things in life that are important to you. You may have different words. Feel free to cross out and change. But these are generally some big, broad ranges in life. If you would, take a moment to think about your present state. How much satisfaction, how in alignment are you feeling in each of those areas? And take your pen, 1 being not very aligned, not very satisfied, 10 being I couldn't be more happy with this area. Just take a moment on each of those wheels, or each of those ideas, areas of life, and just see, where are you? Thanks so much for participating in that. So this last part is particularly interesting for me, and I think for others as well. So on that wheel, there's a number of different places that have to do with relationships, your satisfaction in those areas. Could be made or broken by your relationships. There's an interesting thing happening, not in all countries, but in some countries. And the particular study that's on the slide I found interesting. It's been something as a program director I've been watching, especially somebody in the well-being space. There was a study conducted with The Economist and Kaiser Foundation with the US, UK, Japan. A very interesting phenomenon is happening. 2 out of 10 people in the US and UK report being almost always, if not always, lonely. That's profound. Japan, 1 out of 10. But still, in this room, 2 out of 10 of us, that's a significant amount of us that report being almost always, if not always, lonely. The major change is that's being reported in people under 50 years old. It used to be associated with people, elderly people. I encourage you, we didn't have time to do it here, but Google 75-year study, TED Talk, Harvard. I loved the TED Talk. I loved it. It's one of the longest studies, 75 years, a longevity study, one of the longest to still be going on to this day. The people who started it who were the initial subjects are around 90 plus years old. What this study was an intensive look at someone's life, following them throughout life, actually wanting to see who at the end of life actually reported being happy and satisfied with their lives. And so that's what's happening. This is actually being done in a profound way. There are, every other year there's a survey, there's in-home visits, there's communication with friends and families of these individuals. There were over 700 people of different socioeconomic, diverse backgrounds that were included in this. And 75 years later, there are definitely patterns being shown. And I think the most profound pattern is that it actually didn't matter what station in life someone started, how successful in their job they were, how much money they have. Granted, there's survival in there, granted. But ultimately, success in life depended on the quality of their relationships, the connections that they had. It depended on if they felt someone had their back. That's ultimately who reported being happy and satisfied in life. And the difference with those that report not consistently, they do not have that kind of support. So we felt it was important to use some of our remaining time. Connection in relationships isn't something that just happens on our personal time. And connection isn't the same as networking. One of the things that I interviewed several people that had been here before. I have not been. This is my first time. I'm like, well, what's happening there? And I had heard that it's a big networking thing, and there's lots of different power dynamics. It can feel a little chaotic, and I felt a little lost at times. That's interesting. So connection actually can happen in the present moment, and that's what we want it to bring into the room for this group of people. Can we change that dynamic, not only in our lives when we go back home and look at that, can we actually change it today, tomorrow, maybe for the rest of this week, and have deeper connection? And what would it take? What does that look like? Am I willing to do that? So the last exercise that we want to invite you to play with us in is around that. And Terry, will you introduce that?
Sure. So this is a little exercise we do which is called If You Really Knew Me. And what we're going to do is invite you to break up into groups of 2. So you need to find a partner. Hopefully it's somebody that you may not have come to the conference with, somebody you don't really know. And we're going to have a little exercise where you're going to take turns and you're going to have the opportunity to tell somebody, if you really knew me, ... Maybe uncomfortable for some of you. Might be fun for some of you. But as you do this, please try not to share necessarily what you do, because that's not who you are. A lot of us identify with our roles in life. Actually try to talk about who you are. You might want to share something personal. You might want to share something around your hopes and dreams in the world. But the goal here is to really make a connection with somebody. In a world where we have a high degree of connectivity, we don't necessarily have as much connection as we have in the past, we believe. So don't try to impress anybody. Just share, if you really knew me, ... So I invite you to find a partner, and we're just going to take a couple of minutes. We'll take turns, and the goal here is one of you will be the listener, and that means that you truly listen. It's not about adding to somebody's story. It's not about sharing how that lands with you. It's specifically listening, and then we will ring the bell and we will switch roles, and the listener will have an opportunity to talk. So with that, if you really knew me, and the person with the longest hair talks first. Okay?
Can I ask you to stand together as you...
Good. Nice to actually see that continues to be a conversation that sometimes doesn't stop immediately.
Yeah,
Sometimes rooms just kind of, they're just waiting for the bell desperately for it all to stop. So, great. So how was that for people? What we'd like to do is maybe pass the microphone around and just have a comment from each table around how that experience may have been, how that connection felt to be being made. So anybody volunteer to go first? There we go. And we'll use the microphone if we may, so that it can be picked up on the audio.
Hi, is it on? It's on, okay. Well, I feel like my face is just stretched into a smile because it was really a joy, you know. First, to listen, and it was a bit hard because everything that my partner said, I was like, I wanted to know more. I wanted to ask more questions and learn more detail. Or I wanted to like voice some sort of agreement, or yeah, I feel like that too, and find some common ground. But I couldn't do that. So, and I do like to listen, but I like to talk too. So, but this was really cool to like bound that. And then when I got a chance to talk, I felt like heard, and expression is a joy, especially when it's received. And so I think it was fantastic.
Great. Thank you. Maybe another table to share?
Anyone?
Yeah.
Will this be the time to ask a question too, or no?
Let's hold that for a little bit later if we
But
may.
if you don't have time.
Yeah.
Sure, great. I felt a real connection with Lacey here, and we found common ground, which was kind of fascinating in the sense that her life experience, my life experience, although we started from very different places, we found there was some common element to it through her husband and through my own life experience. So it was really uplifting.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emily. I found it really interesting how not doing this from a place of trying to impress, certainly, but how I was influenced by what I wanted to tell her based on a piece of information I had about her, right? So I immediately went to, well, what would she find interesting to know about me, and trying to kind of make a split-second decision. I also learned that we should party together and hang out. But this person I just met, I'm like, oh, well, I now have a new friend in another country. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Farouk. It was quite difficult, I found, and what was interesting or disconcerting was how difficult it was not to talk about work, or not to start from, what sort of work you do, which at Skoll particularly, even generally, is the first sort of interaction that you have. What do you do? What do I do?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Christine. So what I felt is something I feel when I'm the founder of Brain Dates. So these type of conversations, I witness them a lot. People who don't know each other and then kind of jump into a very personal connection. And I think that's what happened. I think we went right away into like things that are close to our heart and our real self and vulnerability and where we're at in our lives. And I always feel when I witness that for myself or for other people that it just reminds me how human beings are the same, that we're connected, that we're all brothers and sisters. It feels when you find that conversation with somebody and you're like, oh, a brother, a human being, look at that. We share something, we connect, I care for you, I don't know you, but I'm happy to be there for you. And I think this is one of the most beautiful things I think as a human being you can do is allow yourself to go there with somebody you don't know and go to that connection right away as human beings.
Thank you. Hopefully that was valuable.
Can I ask one more question of the group? I agree with that. And last night I was sitting next to somebody from the BBC, and I had shared with her, gosh, how nervous I get and how impressed I am with having, the spur of the moment, trying to direct an interview and deepening it. You can really see skill set there. And as I was sharing, she's like, we don't really share like that in our country. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, that was an overshare. We got to talking a little bit about that vulnerability, so I really appreciate that. When I was going through this presentation with Kathara, who's our representative here with Skoll and our supporter in this presentation, she asked a really interesting question. She asked me to ask the group this question, because she had her own ideas about why. Her question was, what prevents us at a place like this? What prevents us from actually making true connection? And remember, I talked about and as you know, there's a difference between networking and true connection. Because she's like, my deepest desire is that people truly connect. And why don't we so often? And so I said, yeah, for sure, I'll ask the group. Does anyone have any thoughts or ideas about what does prevent us doing that here?
I think it might have a lot to do with where you are in your life. And I felt that in the conversation that we had, which is that she's very actively involved with a 5th-generation family business. I just happen to be in a place where we've just wound up a business we've run for 31 years. And so it was easy for me to not want to make too much of what I do. And I could see that Lacey struggled with it a little bit. So I think it really has a lot to do with where you are in your life, what point in your life you're at.
Thank you. Susan. Always words of wisdom every time you speak.
So my sense is I've been coming here for very many years and to these kinds of things for a lifetime, and my sense is fear. I think we're afraid of really showing who we are to each other, because all of us are these beautiful, gorgeous human beings with all the strengths and non-strengths that we all have. Nobody is perfect, and yet we have this idea of perfection. We have this idea we have to be something. And so we don't let down our guard very easily. And I agree with the previous speaker, when you get hair the color of mine, you don't care anymore. And it's really nice. You care deeply about other people. But what you don't care about anymore is being the human being that you are. So you have something to look forward to, most of you in this room. And the earlier that we can do that, the earlier that we can let go of that fear of who we really are, that self-doubt about who we really are, about not being quite good enough, about feeling that we need to be something in order to be accepted. The earlier we can do that, the happier our lives are. And you can do a little experiment. Just try it once and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, try again. That's what all social entrepreneurs do. So I think this is a wonderful thing that you're doing here, Cheryl and Terry, with the group, so that we can really see this and maybe go out of this room feeling that we are willing to risk. It's about risk. We're willing to risk even a little bit and be in connection. And it's so worth it. I can attest. And you are gorgeous, wonderful human beings.
I would just add to that. I did this exercise once and was talking to somebody, and they said, I am so busy thinking about what I think somebody else is thinking about what I think. And the reality is they don't actually care. And so we spend a lot of energy worrying about that. So
Please.
I think there's one over there.
There's two here. Oh, no. Okay.
Yes.
You each take your pick.
I was just going to comment that I don't think networking really works. I think it only is the connections, because, and this is why this is such a great place to be, because everybody who is great in different ways, right? And if you really just try to find a connection with people on a human level, really amazing things happen. But if you try to just go and architect some kind of technical network, in any domain, that has no longevity. Like it just disappears immediately as soon as interests don't align. But if you have a real deeper connection with people, even if your interests are not, like there's people, I raise money here, but there's people who I'm friends with who will never fund our work, but I'm like friends with them, and we have fun together, and sometimes our interests align and they can help them or they can help me, and because we're friends. But networking is dead. I don't think it works.
And those friends maybe not fund you, but they've got your back. And that's what we were talking about earlier. And that's the network that helps lead a well life. And you're also a natural connector. I already feel connected to you after just 2 minutes earlier on. Please.
So I think we forget how to be children, because when we were children, all this luggage that we carry now was not there. You make friends easier. You don't judge someone by their color or by their social status, or by how much money you can get out of them. You're not going into the playground with an agenda. And I wish we can walk into our next meetings as maybe with the mentality of a child and try to connect humanly with the person sitting in front of us.
Yeah, completely.
Okay, I'm going to say something uncomfortable, but I feel like it needs to be said. So I really love connection, and I feel like it's something that comes naturally to me. And I've been to a lot of conferences like this, and every year all over the world. And one thing that's been a reoccurring discomfort for me is when I do become vulnerable to connect. I've had bad responses in that some, more than often, or it's happened a few times where men will take that as a reason to advance. And that's been like very hard for me to navigate because I want to talk beyond just work. And this actually happened to me twice last night, which was really uncomfortable for me because I was really enjoying the conversation. And then as soon as that happens, it just makes me feel like, wow, this was just like a total waste of the last hour I spent with you. So that's honestly a reason why I have fear connecting with men in a really vulnerable way. And I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on that.
Brilliant comment. And I think about my own experience, and I think there's some truth in there as well. I don't feel like I can stand here and spout solutions to that. All I can do is invite all of us to think about, invite us all to think about how do we show up for connection and read signs and signals, and do we allow for authentic connection? Because actually what was happening there on the other side wasn't actually authentic connection, right? It was an agenda. I'd like to source for the wisdom of the group. Does anybody have a more profound response?
And I wasn't there, so I don't know the situation. I just sit here thinking maybe it was an agenda, maybe it was miscommunication.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
I think especially this day and age, there's a lot we're all trying to figure out about like intergender dynamics.
Totally.
And so I wonder if there's a way to talk about how when those situations happen and how negatively it can feel as a woman to feel like you were having an authentic connection and that person might have felt like it or was interpreting it otherwise, right? Like, is there any way to salvage that for both parties? Maybe not, and there's some situations where it is an agenda driven and inappropriate and you need to have proper boundaries, but I don't know, is there a way to kind of have more clear communication in those situations so that those authentic connections can be better safeguarded so you're not leaving the conversation? Yeah. I don't know the answer. I just think there's just a lot of different ways it can go sideways. And
I think you're speaking to, I don't think we have an answer right now.
Right.
We're in the middle of this and really starting to recognize. So I appreciate you speaking to that.
Yeah.
I saw Heather raise her hand, and I know that Burning Man's been doing a lot of work on some of this. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Heather. First, thank you for sharing that. I'm very touched by that. And yes. Oh, thanks. Yes, Burning Man has been doing that, but I'd also just say as a woman who's been going to conferences for 30 years, what you described is a similar experience that I've had. And so I don't have a profound thing to say, but I have a tactical thing to say.
Just as good.
And there's 2 points. I also really like what you were saying about being in the moment and what can you salvage at that moment. So one, my tactical solution is to sprinkle in very early in the conversation what I'm looking for or not looking for. And so like even just saying, I love, connecting at these events when it's not like sexual or romantic and it's just human connect, like some little appetizer at the beginning to say this is what I'm interested in and this is what I'm not interested in. And I think it can be done politely and with fun and humor and is probably important given where we are. And then the other thing that has been working at Burning Man is that we've been training a lot of people on nonviolent communication, and it's a really great method and tool in the moment if you can, just to say I'd like to share what I'm experiencing and ask if you can reflect back, what you've heard, and if we could have an agreement going forward. And it can sound formal, but you can actually do it in a way where I'd like to continue having this conversation, but I'm not interested in having anything other than this conversation and connection tonight. Would that be okay? Like you can make some inroads, I think, into the conversation in that moment to try to salvage it if it's something that you're interested in. But sometimes it can just go so far off course that it's not, appropriate or going to work. So.
Sorry, can I just respond to that?
Of course.
I think it's really interesting because I've been with Burning Man for years. And so that whole culture of just like heart opening, love, being vulnerable is something how I show up in my daily life. And I think at business conferences where it's expected to talk about work and to not be open really because it just doesn't have this kind of culture. I think that if you show up in that Burning Man kind of open heart way, people might read that wrong or incorrectly, when really I'm just trying to be like giving of love, and I'm not actually sending, for me, I'm not sending signals that I want to have an intimacy with you, but for me, intimacy means heart-soul connection. It doesn't mean sexual or romantic intimacy. And I think that it's just like, the way I see it is like two different cultures almost meeting, and I find that hard to bridge, and I find that hard to communicate. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing. My name's Jill Alton, and I'm with the Skoll Foundation, and I'm one of the organizers. And one of the things that we've done in the last couple of years is had a very strict code of conduct policy written in all of our materials. Okay.
Wrong. They were reading me wrong.
Okay. I did want to say, if something was inappropriate for you or for anyone else, we have a method that you can privately message us and let us know so that we can take care of it. So please email forumdirector@Skoll.org if there's anything that needs to be taken care of.
No, I just wanted to clarify that there was nothing that was like a harassment of any sort.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got one more here.
Thank you for sharing as well. And you kind of sparked a conversation. I think it was necessary. I think regarding what you said, I think as Heather, what I think Heather said, I think that in as you were saying, in the where we're at right now, historically, I think it's a very rich moment, and we're all trying to learn to navigate many diversities in some ways. I'm thinking about the LGBTQ community as well, and like we're trying, I think, all to show up as who we are, and it creates some friction because we're kind of questioning the way that things were always done for the people in power. So I think that, fortunately and unfortunately, I think we may want to take on that role of educating and sharing and raising awareness in our conversations. And sometimes it doesn't feel that you want to do that with your life. You're thinking that you're having a great conversation with a cool dude, and then all of a sudden you're educating, and maybe that's not what you wanted to do of your, Tuesday night. And we can decide to do it or not. Like, I don't think we have to, as for example, in my being as a woman, like, I think you can decide that night not to do it if you don't feel like it. But I think, regarding a bit what you were saying as well, like, I think it's really valuable if you feel to do so, to stand up and talk openly about how you feel in a situation like that. So at least if like you say, you don't salvage that relationship, at least maybe you leave having a feeling that you didn't waste your time because you were able ultimately to have a conversation about, listen, I thought we were having a great conversation, and I'm super disappointed right now that that's where you're taking it, because as a woman, I would like to connect humanly with a man without feeling that I'm inviting him in my bed. Like, having a conversation like that, I think, can provide a lot of value to this person's life. Even you will never reap the benefit, of having had the courage to stand up like that. But I think when we feel like doing so, I think it can bring a lot. Yeah.
I think we've got one more.
Thank you.
attending few conferences, and I've been awarded fellowships at few different programs. And one of the programs in India called Inc., we had a kind of a initiation session in a room like this before the conference started, and Lakshmi, who is the curator of the conference, she actually created that safe space before she asked people to be open-hearted and be vulnerable in front of each other and can have a heart-to-heart conversation. So she kind of, I won't call it a rule book, but she's like the mama who would say, don't do drugs, don't sleep with each other. It may sound like a good idea, but just don't. Don't mistreat the staff, the support staff. If we find that you have not been kind or nice with the staff, which is, it could be the hotel staff or anybody who is helping, you are out. And the moment that happened, this safe space was created. And to be honest, it can't happen with 1,200 people at the same time. But yes, there could be small groups. So the cohort of fellows was 40 fellows. So there were 20 new and few old. And now, because there is a set of rules and everybody knows that this cannot happen because we have been warned, we have been told, and there couldn't be any excuse. Suddenly, the entire dynamics change and it becomes like a very close-knit, open-hearted family.
Yes. Very interesting.
Thank you. All right, we'll take one more and then we'll...
I find that Susan, about the fearlessness of openness and the fearfulness that this lady explained, is what this class is all about. Building your spirituality to the extent where you can handle situations like this. As women, we are strong, and we've brought up children, we've had mothers and fathers, and when you come up with a situation like this, that helps. But it also helps to be very self-assured and centered within oneself, to be able to see where a conversation is going and to nip it in the bud at the right time so that one doesn't come to the point of feeling so uncomfortable that you get offended and you get up and walk out, or you feel like it's a waste of time.
All right, thank you. That was a good conversation. So we're going to start to wrap this up now. And what I would invite you all to do, if you feel comfortable, is with the partner that you had during this exercise, if you want to share and exchange contact information, there's some cards on the table that will let you do that. Check in with them in the next few days, but try not to do it digitally. Try to figure out how to make that personal connection of being human. It's so easy just to text a message. It takes a little bit of effort in these environments to stop and say, I'll meet you in the lobby at 5 o'clock just to check in on how you're doing. So we invite you to do that. One of the things that we have at Esalen is we're very blessed. We're on the edge of California in a specific area of Highway 1. Beautiful place, but it has no cell signal. And we have very limited internet. So when people come to us, they actually have to make a human connection. And we purposely turn all the Wi-Fi off during meal times. So people actually sit and talk. And nobody has their phone out because we have somebody that walks around and goes, would you put your phone away? But it really does start to build that human connection. And at the end of the day, we are all just human. So with that, I think a quick little recap and then maybe a couple of questions just generally.
Absolutely. So the cards in front of you was our way to help support connection. And I think there was such a deep conversation in here around what connection could look like in a positive way and what connection can look like if it's not done skillfully. So I think the groundwork is laid here that our invitation is actually to check in with one another and just help each other feel connected during this conference. So during this presentation, we talked a little bit about why us, why are we standing here. You learned a little bit about Esalen at the high level and the Wellbeing Project and how that is working with some of the major organizations in social change around changing that culture. And then finally, we got an opportunity to look a little bit closer at some of the well-being practices. Meditation being one that was reported by most of the well-being participants as being profoundly impactful in their lives. And then the wheel of life and your life balance, and hopefully making some further connection. So with that, we thank you so much for coming here. I think we have 1-2 minutes that we can field any questions, but there's contact information on there if you want to follow up either with myself or Terry. And we deeply appreciate the work that we do in this world, and deeply hope that we all come into that inner alignment with that outer purpose, because truly those two connections are necessary to make the kind of changes and kind of differences in the world both sustainable and impactful. So thank you so much for taking your morning, spending your time here. And I know we had one question, real quick.
It's a quick question,
yeah.
Maybe a long answer.
Okay.
At one point you said, when you were speaking about old folks and how they deal with loneliness and stuff
yes.
like that, you said there are people who don't have that kind of support. I've started to struggle with that a little bit in my life, in that there's a point up to which you can help someone, you can offer your assistance, but ultimately, if they see themselves as people who are victims and need that kind of support, it's a little challenging for them to make that transition. And I'm struggling with whether I'm helping them or hurting them by offering too much support.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have an actual question that you want me to answer? Or just a comment?
No.
That's a great comment.
When you said don't have that kind of support, is that realistic? That
I think if I take it into my own life, I do feel that part of when I can connect into source, or when I have that flow state, I definitely know that a key element for me is having support. And had I always allowed that support in the past, I think sometimes I have not. And I came to a place where I recognized it's essential for me. And what some of those studies are suggesting is that it's actually essential for many people to have support. So it's my responsibility to understand who my support system is and how I rely on them, how I open up to them. It's also my responsibility to offer my support to those in my life, but I can't force it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. All right, so we're going to bring this to a close, and I invite you to do it the way we do it pretty much every day at Esalen. So if we would like...
Okay, this is a big one.
This is a big one.
This is a big one.
We're actually just going to make a circle around the outside of the room.
Hopefully we can stretch the tables.
Yes, we're actually going to connect. So we're just going to hold hands, and if you feel more comfortable butting elbows, that's okay, but go with thumbs to the left. And then everybody has their hands pointing in the right direction. Let's see if we can't.
What does that mean?
Just thumbs to the left.
Means your thumbs go to the left, hold hands that way.
All right. Thumbs to the left. All right. And let's all just take a deep breath. We'll come back to breath. It all comes back to breath. We'll breathe in through the nose. Let it out. We'll take one more deep breath. And let it out. And just make connection with somebody across the room, eye to eye. And thank you all for being human and being here today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great conference.
You're welcome.